Hi, I'm His Lordship, the founder of the Wilderness Guardians, and welcome to Castle Critic, the series in which we look at all of Runescape's castles by release date and see how well they'd hold up against an attack. This is episode 4 and we're looking at Camelot Castle. Now it has been 5 years since the last video, so I'd like to reintroduce myself, but if you'd like to skip to the analysis, you can find it in the timestamp below. I am a castle aficionado. I have several books on the matter, and I've subscribed to several channels on YouTube and studied medieval history at some length, though I don't claim to be an expert. So if there's any information that's incorrect in your reckoning, please do comment below and rectify that so that we can learn together. I've been to several dozen castles in my life, and it is a huge passion of mine. So let's apply the knowledge that I've gained in the real world to see how well these fantasy castles hold up. As with previous episodes of this series, we have to make 4 essential assumptions about the castles of Runescape. Number 1, they're made to ward off human invaders or human-like invaders. So we're not talking about airborne creatures like dragons, for which castles would look totally different. Would they even be made? Assumption number 2 is that we can't assume that NPCs can freely teleport as the players can. We have to assume that if a city or a kingdom was to be invaded, the villagers and the NPCs would board themselves up in their fortifications rather than try to flee using magic. Of course, that would be the case. Otherwise, why would castles exist in this world? Assumption number 3 is that cannons are fairly new to the game. Now you'll see even in this video that there will be some cannons shown, but as cannon and gunpowder technology in the Middle Ages advanced, that was one of several reasons that led to the downfall of castles. So we must assume that it's very early in their stage of progress. And assumption number 4 is that magic has no effect or little effect on the walls and the fortifications. So casting, say, a fire blast or some ancient magic on the walls would be negligible. With that said, let's get into the analysis of Camelot Castle.
Camelot Castle was released on the 27th of February 2002. It's the 4th castle to be introduced to the game, the first in the Kingdom of Kandarin, and the only to be directly lifted from real-world lore. Outside of the Camelot Quest series, this castle is visited very little, except as a teleport destination for Seer's Village or Catherby. Camelot differs from others in the Castle Critic series in that it is not owned by a royal family or large organisation. In fact, it was owned by a wealthy nobleman, Lord Sinclair, who gifted the castle to King Arthur and his knights upon their arrival in Galenor. For this reason, we must analyse the castle's defences with one consideration in mind, that this building is not a centre of governance and therefore holds less strategic value for invaders. Therefore, there is less impetus for the castle to be heavily fortified, which is both costly and aesthetically undesirable. As you can see, the castle's design has not changed since RuneScape Classic, retaining its current form in Old School and RS3. For this video, as with all castles in the series, we'll be looking at it through an Old School lens. When looking at castle defences, it's best to start with location. Camelot is situated in the far north of the Kingdom of Kandarin. It was no doubt built here so that the King of Ardoin would have a northern warden. Indeed, lore states that King Ulthus, father of the current king, Lathus, and Lord Sinclair were good friends. However, the building site was poorly chosen as it did not utilise the ample natural defences provided in that area. While its northern side is surrounded by water, it would have been the easiest thing to dig a water-filled moat to prevent battering rams and siege towers and ladders from nestling up against the castle walls. The newly built Sinclair Mansion is actually better located as it is protected from 2 sides. To be fair, water-filled moats were not the norm in medieval times, but were favoured wherever the terrain made them possible. This would certainly be true here. What is unforgivable, though, is that the castle is built on flat land rather than on an elevated mound or motte. This is very rare in the real world. Usually earthworkers in the Middle Ages would have dug out a ditch and used that soil and stone to create a mound upon which to place the castle. Take, for example, Clifford's Tower in York. Where a castle was built on flat land, there would almost certainly have been a body of water, such as a moat, as you can see here in the case of Camelot Castle in Scotland. Now let's zoom in a little and look at the architecture itself. Now, it's a common misconception that castles have to be surrounded by an outer curtain wall. Quite often it was the case that the castle was a single unwalled tower, especially in distant outposts of a kingdom like this. The fact that there is no outer wall for this castle conforms to real-world expectations. The iron fence and hedging here doesn't offer any defensive capabilities, and in fact the hedge in particular is detrimental. Defenders would prefer a clear vantage point so that they can fire down on approaching enemies. It really should be cut down. The fence, however, can stay. For the building itself, we can see that the rooms of the castle form part of the outer defences, with a courtyard in the middle. This is a very commonplace design throughout Europe, but in England particularly, so no issues here. What's truly baffling though, is the fact that this courtyard can be breached instantly, as there is no gate. Would you not want an extra line of defense before accessing the inner parts of the castle? If perhaps it was their intention to bunch up attackers in the courtyard and then fire down on them with spells, arrows, hot sand, etc., then they would have created some arrow slits and murder holes. Even more bizarrely, half the courtyard is covered by an overhanging second floor, under which the invaders can rally completely invulnerable. This is incredibly stupid design, also because it makes the castle's upper floors very vulnerable. That overhang is containing a lot of weight from the upper floors, and if it were to be hit by a siege weapon, every part of the castle would collapse. And that brings me to the most heinous injustice done to this castle. 3 of the 4 walls protrude outward as they get higher. See these columns here? They are holding up the entire weight of the upper floors. This castle has been built like an inverse pyramid, getting larger towards the top. Worse still, the floors of the upper stories are made of stone and not wood as they would have been in the Middle Ages, and the walls of the upstairs room don't align with the downstairs walls, meaning the distribution of weight is all messed up. This defies the laws of physics and is a practical impossibility. But let's suspend our disbelief for just 1 second and assume it's possible somehow. What we have on our hands is the worst load-bearing building I've ever seen. And a few catapults or battering rams would not just bust a hole in the walls, but indeed turn the entire thing into rubble. Now, is there anything nice I can say about this castle? Well, I suppose so. The large towers at the corners of the castle are pretty well designed. They are octagonal, which gives better structural integrity than square towers, as well as better field of vision. And the corners offer better utilization of space than circular towers. You see a good real-world example in Camelot Castle in Wales. Another interesting aspect of the towers is the use of ladders rather than stairs. Now, this is rather uncommon, but not unheard of. Indeed, ladders can be withdrawn from upper levels, preventing attackers from gaining access. In the real world, you see it mostly on castle exteriors, such as Augstein Castle in Austria. The use of ladders is somewhat redundant though, because attackers could easily smash the outward facing glass windows and just barge in with their own ladders. In fact, they don't even need ladders, as there are large windows on the ground floor. External facing windows should be so small that attackers can't enter. You put your big windows on the courtyard facing walls. It's one of the main reasons you have a courtyard. Just like the columns, I get that they look really cool, Jagex, but they are a disservice to the fortifications. I'm not done disparaging the fortifications just yet. Let's look at the main gate now. It's made of wood, which is very normal for a medieval castle door. However, it should be reinforced with iron to resist battering rams, reduce exposure to flames, and make the wood more durable in general. Now let's look at the Krenellations up on top. Krenellations are made up of 2 components. The merlons are the large upright stone sections, and the crenelles, the gaps between the merlons. Archers are supposed to hide behind those merlons and fire through the crenelles. If they don't reach head height, then they are purely cosmetic, as these are. You might be looking at the cannons on the top floor as being useful for defense, but cannons are a mostly offensive weapon designed to bring down walls, not defend them. They serve limited value in bringing down siege equipment, but they are highly inaccurate and rather slow. They certainly won't work on foot soldiers unless the defenders were dropping the cannonballs directly down along the walls. Finally, there's one less obvious shortcoming in the castle's design that only dawns on you after a short while. There is no kitchen or pantry or any other food storage aside from 1 barrel of ale. The most common way for a castle to be besieged was by encirclement, with the attackers waiting for the defenders to be starved out. Without reasonable food stores, the inhabitants of Camelot would have mere days before their inevitable surrender, unless Merlin can magically conjure up something. To sum things up, Camelot is a hodgepodge of mostly bad decisions. The corner towers are reasonably well designed and the courtyard layout is historically accurate. But just on the merits of this being an architectural impossibility, I have to award a harsh penalty to the castle's defensive rating. That's before taking into account the large exterior windows, the poor location, lack of front gate, lack of supplies, and lack of battlement features like arrow slits, proper crenellations, and murder holes. All in all, I can't in good conscience award more than half a star. This is the lowest ranking awarded so far, though 0 stars is theoretically possible. Next up, we'll be looking at the Dark Warriors Fortress in the Wilderness, and I promise you won't have to wait another 5 years before I release that one. Happy scaping, everyone.